Welcome, dear listener, to Sleepless Survivors. Tonight, we embark on a journey through time, through myth, through the veils of history that separate us from one of humanity's most enigmatic mysteries. Let your eyes grow heavy as we explore the ancient knowledge of beings who descended from the stars, beings known to the Sumerians as the Anunnaki. As you settle into comfort, allow your breathing to slow. Feel the weight of your body sinking deeper into rest. Tonight's journey will carry you through ancient Mesopotamia, through clay tablets written in cuneiform script, through legends that have persisted for over 5,000 years. The story we tell tonight is one of gods and humans, of creation and knowledge, of a time when the boundary between earth and sky was thinner than gossamer, and beings of immense power walked among mortals. Close your eyes now, if you haven't already. Let the ancient world unfold before you. Chapter 1. The Land Between Two Rivers. Picture, if you will, a land of extraordinary fertility. The year is approximately 3,000 years before the Common Era. Between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, a civilization flourishes unlike any the world has known before. This is Sumer, the cradle of civilization, where writing was born, where the wheel first turned, where mathematics and astronomy reached heights that would not be surpassed for millennia. The air is thick with the scent of barley and date palms. Ziggurats rise toward the heavens, their mud brick steps climbing like sacred mountains toward the realm of the gods. In the cities of Ur, Uruk, Eridu and Lagash, priests and priestesses tend to deities whose names echo through eternity. Anu, Enlil, Enki, Inanna, Ninhursag. But among all the gods of the Sumerian pantheon, there is one collective name that encompasses the divine hierarchy. One term that would spark countless debates and theories millennia later. They were called the Anunnaki, meaning those who from heaven to earth came. Let your mind drift now, back through the corridors of time. The Anunnaki were not simply abstract concepts or natural forces personified. According to the ancient texts, they were physical beings, entities who descended from the sky, who established cities, who taught humanity the arts of civilization. The Sumerians did not speak of their gods in the distant metaphorical language we might expect. They spoke of them as one might speak of rulers, of teachers, of powerful beings who lived among them, who made decisions that affected their daily lives, who could be pleased or angered, who required temples and offerings. In the quiet darkness of your rest, imagine the night sky as the ancient Sumerians saw it. Without the pollution of artificial light, the stars blaze with an intensity we can scarcely imagine today. The Milky Way stretches across the heavens like a river of light, and somewhere among those stars the Sumerians believed was the home of the Anunnaki. The word itself carries weight. Anunnaki, Anunnaki. Let it roll through your mind like an ancient incantation. Anu was the sky god, the supreme deity, the father of gods. Ki represented the earth. The Anunnaki, then, were the children of heaven and earth, divine beings who bridged the cosmic and terrestrial realms. Chapter 2. The Tablets Speak. Let us drift now to the archives, to the great libraries of clay where the Sumerians recorded everything they deemed important. Your breathing grows slower, deeper, as we examine these ancient records. The discovery of cuneiform tablets in the 19th and 20th centuries opened a window into a world previously known only through fragmentary references in later texts. Archaeologists digging in the ruins of Mesopotamian cities uncovered hundreds of thousands of clay tablets, each one inscribed with wedge-shaped characters pressed into soft clay before baking. Among these tablets were epic poems, legal documents, astronomical observations, mathematical calculations, and detailed mythological narratives. And threaded throughout these texts, appearing again and again, were references to the Anunnaki. The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, tells of how the universe began in watery chaos, how the gods emerged from the mingling of fresh and salt waters, how younger generations of deities rebelled against the old. In this cosmic drama, the Anunnaki play crucial roles as witnesses, as workers, as divine administrators of creation itself. Feel yourself sinking deeper into relaxation as we explore these ancient stories. There is no need to hold on to every detail. Let the words wash over you like waves upon an ancient shore. According to the tablets, the Anunnaki numbered among the great gods of heaven and earth. Some texts speak of 50 great gods, others of 7 who decree fate, still others of 300 Anunnaki of heaven, and 600 of the underworld. The numbers shift and change like sand in desert winds, but the presence of these beings remains constant throughout Mesopotamian literature. The Atrahasis epic, an old Babylonian account of creation and the Great Flood, provides one of the most detailed descriptions of the Anunnaki's activities. In this tale, the great gods made the Anunnaki perform arduous labour, digging rivers and canals, endless toil that eventually led to rebellion among the lower-ranking divine beings. Let your muscles relax completely as you hear this ancient story. The Anunnaki grew weary of their labour, we're told. They complained of their burdens, of the endless digging and carrying, and so the gods, in their wisdom, decided to create a new being who would take over this labour, a creature formed from clay and divine essence. This being was humanity. In the darkness behind your closed eyes, imagine the moment of creation. Enki, god of wisdom and water, and Ninhursag, the mother goddess, combining clay from the earth with the blood of a slain god. From this mixture, humanity emerges, designed specifically to serve the gods, to maintain the earth, to free the Anunnaki from their endless toil. This creation narrative, preserved in cuneiform on ancient clay, presents humanity not as the pinnacle of creation, but as servants of the divine, beings crafted with a purpose, designed to fulfill a function in the cosmic order. It is a humbling origin story, yet one that grants humans a direct connection to the divine realm through their very substance. Chapter 3. The Gods Descend. Drift deeper now into the realm of ancient knowledge. Your body grows heavier, more relaxed, as we explore the nature of these sky gods. The Sumerian king list, one of the most intriguing documents from ancient Mesopotamia, begins with a startling claim. When kingship was lowered from heaven, kingship was first in Eridu. This phrase, lowered from heaven, appears repeatedly in Sumerian texts. Kingship did not evolve naturally from human society according to these records. It was given, transmitted from the divine realm to the earthly one. The Anunnaki, in this understanding, were the source of civilization itself. They brought knowledge of agriculture, of metallurgy, of writing and mathematics. They established the first cities and appointed the first kings. The boundary between myth and history blurs in these ancient accounts, leaving us to wonder what kernel of truth might lie beneath layers of metaphor and cultural memory. Consider the Sumerian me, often translated as divine decrees or fundamental principles of civilization. These me encompassed everything from practical skills like woodworking and metallurgy to abstract concepts like justice and truth. According to the myths, these me were guarded by the Anunnaki gods, particularly by Enki in the city of Eridu. The goddess Inanna, in one famous myth, travels to Eridu and tricks Enki into giving her the me, which she then brings to her city of Uruk. In this story, we see the Anunnaki as possessors of fundamental knowledge, as gatekeepers of the wisdom that makes civilization possible. They are not merely powerful, they are learned, cultured, possessing secrets that can elevate humanity or leave it in darkness. Let your mind wander through an ancient Sumerian city. Feel the sun-baked earth beneath your feet. See the ziggurat rising against the blue sky. Hear the murmur of voices in the marketplace. And above, always above, the awareness of the divine presence, the knowledge that the Anunnaki watch over all. The Anunnaki were arranged in a strict hierarchy, a divine bureaucracy that mirrored and perhaps inspired earthly governance. At the top sat the supreme triad, Anu, the Sky Father, Enlil, Lord of the air and earth, and Enki, god of wisdom and the sweet waters beneath the earth. Below them were 7 gods who determined destiny, and below them the great assembly of 50 Anunnaki deities. This organization speaks to a sophisticated theological system, one that had evolved over centuries, to encompass both cosmic forces and practical administration of human affairs. Each deity had specific responsibilities, specific domains of influence. They could agree or disagree, form alliances or rivalries, make decisions collectively, or pursue individual agendas. Chapter 4. Enki, the Wise. Let us focus now on one particular member of the Anunnaki, one whose character and actions appear most frequently in the ancient tales. Relax deeper as we explore the god Enki, also known by his Akkadian name Ea. Enki dwelt in the Abzu, the cosmic waters beneath the earth, source of all fertility and wisdom. He was the crafty god, the clever one, the friend of humanity. In myth after myth, when the other gods threaten humanity with destruction, it is Enki who finds ways to preserve human life. The story of the Great Flood appears in multiple Mesopotamian texts, most famously in the Epic of Gilgamesh. In these accounts, the gods grow weary of humanity's noise and disturbances. Enlil, stern lord of the earth, convinces the divine council to send a catastrophic flood to wipe out human civilization. The Anunnaki gods agree to this terrible decision, but Enki, bound by oath not to reveal the gods' plan directly to humans, finds a clever solution. He speaks to the reed wall of the house where the man Utnapishtim sleeps. Reed wall, Enki whispers. Tear down your house and build a boat. Abandon possessions and seek life. Forsake goods and save life. Take aboard the seed of all living things into the boat. Utnapishtim, hearing these words spoken to his wall, understands and obeys. He builds a great boat, seals it with bitumen, and brings aboard his family, craftsmen and animals of every kind. When the flood comes, when the storm god Adad makes his voice thunder in the clouds, and the Anunnaki raise their torches to light up the land with their brightness, Utnapishtim and those aboard his boat survive. The flood narrative reveals much about how the Sumerians understood the Anunnaki. These were not omniscient beings. They could make decisions they later regretted. When the floodwaters recede and the gods discover that humans have survived, several of them are angry, but others are relieved. The goddess Ishtar weeps, lamenting her agreement to the destruction. Enlil is furious that his plan was thwarted, while Enki defends his actions. Let this ancient drama play out in your drowsy mind. The Anunnaki emerge from these stories as complex beings, capable of both terrible destruction and surprising compassion, bound by their own laws and hierarchies yet able to bend rules through cleverness and interpretation. Chapter 5. The Gift of Civilization. Your breathing has slowed to a gentle rhythm now. Let us explore how the Anunnaki, according to ancient belief, shaped human civilization. In Sumerian mythology, there was a time before civilization, a time when humans existed in a more primitive state. The Anunnaki, having created humanity to relieve themselves of labour, now set about teaching their creation how to properly serve them and maintain the earth. The god Oannes, described in the writings of the Babylonian priest Berossus, emerged from the waters of the Persian Gulf to teach humanity during the day, returning to the sea each night. Oannes instructed humans in writing, in the arts and sciences, in agriculture and building. This figure, part fish and part human in form, represents the transmission of knowledge from the divine realm to the human one. Similarly, texts describe how various Anunnaki taught humanity specific skills. Enki taught the arts of magic and wisdom. Ninhursag taught midwifery and healing. Utu, the sun god, brought justice and law. Each deity contributed to the foundation of civilized life. The city of Eridu, considered the first city in Sumerian tradition, was sacred to Enki. Here, at the temple called Iabzu, priests performed rituals connecting Earth to the cosmic waters below and the heavens above. Eridu represented the point where divine will first manifested in human civilization, where the knowledge of the Anunnaki first took root in human consciousness. Archaeological evidence confirms that Eridu is indeed one of the oldest continuously occupied sites in Mesopotamia, with settlement layers dating back over 7,000 years. The ruins of multiple temple rebuilds, each constructed atop the previous one, suggest a sacred site of enduring importance. Whether this validates the myths, or whether the myths grew from the site's obvious antiquity, we cannot definitively say. But the connection between story and stone is unmistakable. Let your mind drift through these ancient temples, smell the incense burning on altars, hear the chanting of priests, see the play of lamplight on walls painted with images of gods and sacred symbols. The Anunnaki were not distant abstractions but present powers, worshipped daily, consulted in every important decision. Chapter 6. The Council of Gods. Deeper now into sleep's embrace, we explore the governance of heaven and earth as the Sumerians understood it. The Anunnaki, according to the tablets, met in divine assembly to discuss matters affecting both celestial and terrestrial realms. This council of gods determined the fates of cities, appointed kings, decreed laws, and settled disputes. The concept influenced later legal and political structures throughout the ancient Near East. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, when the wild man Enkidu offends the gods, the Anunnaki gather to determine his punishment. They debate among themselves, weighing Enkidu's actions and his worth. Some argue for his death, others for mercy. Eventually they decree that Enkidu must die for his transgression, though they grant him time to understand his fate. This scene reveals the Anunnaki as judicial beings, applying law even to those they care for, following procedures and precedents. The divine realm mirrors human courts of law, or perhaps more accurately, human courts mirror the divine pattern they believed existed among the Anunnaki. The number 7 held special significance in descriptions of the Anunnaki Council. 7 great gods who decree fate, 7 divine judges of the underworld. 7 appears repeatedly in Mesopotamian religion and mythology, a number of completion and power. These 7 judges of the underworld, called the Anunnaki in some texts, ruled over the realm of the dead. When the goddess Inanna descends to the underworld to visit her sister Ereshkigal, she must pass through 7 gates, removing 1 article of clothing and jewellery at each, arriving finally naked and powerless before the 7 judges who condemn her to death. Only through the cleverness of Enki and the sacrifice of her husband Dumuzi is Inanna later restored to life. The underworld in Sumerian thought was not primarily a place of punishment, but simply the land of the dead, a dim mirror of the world above, where all souls eventually travelled regardless of their morality in life. The Anunnaki of the underworld maintained order in this realm just as their celestial counterparts maintained order above. Let these ancient concepts wash over you like gentle waves. The cosmic order, the divine hierarchy, the careful balance between realms, all maintained by the vigilance and governance of the Anunnaki. Chapter 7. Astronomical Knowledge. As you sink deeper into restful sleep, consider the remarkable astronomical knowledge of the ancient Sumerians, knowledge they attributed to the teachings of the Anunnaki. The Sumerian skywatchers tracked the movements of celestial bodies with extraordinary precision. They divided the sky into 12 sections, creating the zodiac that would influence astrology and astronomy for millennia. They calculated the lunar month, created calendars, and predicted eclipses. They identified the 5 visible planets and associated each with specific deities: Jupiter with Marduk, Venus with Inanna, Mercury with Nabu, Mars with Nergal, Saturn with Ninurta. The astronomical knowledge preserved in cuneiform tablets demonstrates sophisticated mathematical calculations and long-term observations. The Mulapin tablets, dating to around 1000 BCE, but likely preserving much older knowledge, contain detailed star catalogues, descriptions of planetary movements, and instructions for astronomical observations. How did a civilization emerging in the 4th millennium BCE acquire such precise astronomical knowledge? The tablets themselves provide an answer that modern scholars interpret as mythology. The Anunnaki taught them. The gods, who came from the stars, shared their knowledge of the heavens with humanity. The Sumerian creation myth describes how Marduk, after defeating the chaos dragon Tiamat, organized the cosmos. He established the stations of the great gods in the heavens, created the stars as their likenesses, fixed the year, and divided it into months, set up 3 stars for each month of the year. The heavens became a vast cosmic clock and calendar, and the Anunnaki assigned themselves positions within this celestial order. Whether we interpret this as poetic description of astronomical observation, or as cultural memory of actual instruction by more advanced beings, the connection between the Anunnaki and celestial knowledge remains central to Sumerian thought. In your drowsy state, imagine the priests on the ziggurat summit, night after night, watching the stars wheel overhead, recording their observations on clay tablets, consulting the ancient wisdom about which movements portend which events on Earth. The heavens and earth connected through the medium of astronomical knowledge. Legacy of the Anunnaki. Chapter 8. The Anunnaki and Human Kings. Let your consciousness drift now to the relationship between the divine Anunnaki and earthly rulers. The Sumerian king list presents a fascinating chronology of rulers, beginning with dynasties that reigned before the Great Flood, when kings lived for tens of thousands of years. After the flood, the list continues with more historically verifiable dynasties, though even these early post-flood kings are credited with improbably long reigns. The text declares that kingship was lowered from heaven, suggesting that political authority itself was a divine gift, transmitted from the Anunnaki to humanity. Kings ruled not by their own power but as representatives and servants of the gods. Each city had its patron deity among the Anunnaki, and the city's king served as the high priest of that god's temple. Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, exemplifies this connection. The epic describes him as 2/3 divine and 1/3 human, son of the goddess Ninsun and a human father. His extraordinary strength and wisdom derived from his partial divine nature, his connection to the Anunnaki bloodline. The concept of divine kingship, where rulers trace their authority and sometimes their lineage to the gods, spread throughout the ancient world, but it found perhaps its earliest and most explicit expression in Sumerian Mesopotamia. The king stood as intermediary between the Anunnaki and ordinary humans, responsible for maintaining the gods' temples, ensuring proper rituals, and administering justice according to divine principles. Royal inscriptions repeatedly credit the Anunnaki with choosing kings, granting them wisdom, and ensuring their victories in battle. When Hammurabi of Babylon compiled his famous law code around 1750 BCE, the stone stele depicted him receiving the laws directly from the sun god Shamash, one of the great Anunnaki. The laws themselves were thus invested with divine authority, reflecting the justice of the gods rather than merely human invention. Let this ancient understanding of authority drift through your mind. Power flowing from heaven to earth, from the Anunnaki through their chosen representatives to the people, a cosmic hierarchy reflected in earthly governance. Chapter 9. The Anunnaki in Later Traditions. As you rest deeper in sleep's embrace, trace with me how the concept of the Anunnaki evolved and persisted beyond ancient Sumer. When Akkadian-speaking peoples dominated Mesopotamia, they adopted Sumerian gods into their own pantheon, translating names and sometimes merging deities with similar functions. The Anunnaki concept persisted, appearing in Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian texts for over 2,000 years. The Babylonians elevated Marduk, originally a relatively minor Sumerian deity, to supreme status. The Enuma Elish, the Babylonian creation epic, depicts Marduk defeating the chaos goddess Tiamat and creating the cosmos from her body. After his victory, the other Anunnaki gods acknowledge Marduk's supremacy and build him the great city of Babylon with its ziggurat, the Etemenanki, possibly the inspiration for the biblical Tower of Babel. In the Babylonian version, the Anunnaki build Babylon as a gesture of gratitude to Marduk. They spend a year creating the bricks and constructing the temple complex. The text describes how the Anunnaki gods themselves laboured on this construction, a reversal of the earlier narrative where they created humans to relieve themselves of such work. The act demonstrates Marduk's supremacy, worthy of service even from other great gods. The Assyrians similarly adapted the Anunnaki to their own religious worldview, often emphasizing martial aspects and incorporating the gods into narratives celebrating Assyrian military victories. Throughout these cultural transformations, the essential concept endured. The Anunnaki were the great gods, the powerful ones who shaped heaven and earth, who determined the fate of humanity. Beyond Mesopotamia proper, echoes of Anunnaki concepts may have influenced later religious and mythological systems. Scholars have noted parallels between Mesopotamian myths and narratives in the Hebrew Bible, Greek mythology, and other traditions. While direct influence is difficult to prove and must be argued carefully, the cultural exchange throughout the ancient Near East certainly allowed for the transmission of ideas, stories, and religious concepts. Let these connections drift through your consciousness like stars reflected in still water, influences flowing across time and culture, ancient wisdom filtering through successive civilizations. Chapter 10. The Sacred Rituals. Deeper into the night now, into the realm of sacred practice, we explore how the Sumerians worshipped the Anunnaki. The great temples, called ziggurats, served as physical links between earth and heaven. These stepped pyramids rose from the flat Mesopotamian plain like artificial mountains, their upper levels accessed by long staircases that symbolized the ascent from the human realm toward the divine. At the summit of each ziggurat stood a shrine, a holy chamber where the deity was believed to dwell or visit. Here the highest priests and priestesses performed sacred rites, offering sacrifices, reciting prayers, consulting omens. The common people could not enter these sacred spaces. They worshipped in lower courtyard areas, while the inner mysteries remained the province of the priestly class who had trained for years in the esoteric knowledge of the Anunnaki. Daily rituals followed precise patterns, The statue of the god housed in the innermost sanctuary would be awakened each morning, washed, dressed in fine garments, and offered food and drink. Musicians played, incense burned, prayers rose toward heaven. In the evening, the god would be ceremonially put to rest, the temple doors closed until dawn. These rituals, repeated day after day for centuries, maintained the relationship between the Anunnaki and humanity. They ensured cosmic order, agricultural fertility, protection from enemies, and the gods' continued favour. To neglect the rituals was to risk chaos, to invite disaster. The well-being of the entire city depended on proper service to the Anunnaki. Sacred festivals marked important points in the calendar. The New Year festival, the Akkitu, celebrated in Babylon, involved elaborate ceremonies lasting 12 days. The king underwent ritual humiliation, being stripped of his crown and regalia, then restored to power with renewed divine sanction. Processions carried divine statues through the streets. Ritual combats reenacted Marduk's victory over Tiamat. The entire society participated in renewing its covenant with the Anunnaki. Priests trained for years in the temple schools, learning to read and write cuneiform, studying the ancient myths, memorizing ritual procedures, learning to interpret omens and dreams. They became intermediaries between humanity and the Anunnaki, specialists in maintaining cosmic harmony. Let the ancient chants echo in your consciousness, rhythm and repetition inducing trance states, connecting worshippers across the boundary between mortal and divine, the smoke of incense rising, the gleam of lamplight on golden cult statues, the solemnity of sacred space where the Anunnaki's presence could be felt. Chapter 11. Divination and Omens. As sleep deepens around you, explore how the Sumerians communed with the Anunnaki through signs and portents. The Mesopotamians believed the gods communicated constantly through natural phenomena, animal behaviour, the flight of birds, the patterns of oil on water, the shape of sheep livers, and especially through dreams and celestial events. Everything potentially carried meaning, a message from the divine realm to those trained to interpret it. Entire libraries of omen texts survive, cataloguing thousands of possible signs and their meanings. If a particular bird landed on a particular part of a house, it meant one thing. If two birds appeared together, it meant another. If the moon was eclipsed on a certain day of the month, specific consequences would follow. This was not superstition in the modern sense, but rather a sophisticated system of correspondence, a belief that the cosmos formed an interconnected whole, where events in one realm reflected or predicted events in another. The Anunnaki, who established cosmic order, sent signals to those wise enough to read them. Dream interpretation held special importance. The Anunnaki could visit humans in sleep, delivering messages, warnings, or commands. Kings regularly consulted dream interpreters, and important dreams were recorded on tablets as significant historical events. Gilgamesh and his companion Enkidu both received crucial dreams during their adventures, messages from the divine realm that guide or warn them. The ritual of incubation involved sleeping in a temple specifically to receive a dream from the god. The supplicant would purify themselves, make offerings, and then sleep in the sacred precinct, hoping for divine communication. These dreams, when they came, carried the authority of direct contact with the Anunnaki. Extispacy, the examination of sacrificial animal organs, especially the liver, represented another crucial divinatory practice. The liver was considered the seat of life and consciousness, and its shape, colour and markings supposedly reflected the will of the gods. Clay models of livers covered with cuneiform inscriptions served as teaching tools, mapping the significance of each feature. Before any major decision, kings consulted diviners. Before battle, before building projects, before diplomatic initiatives, the will of the Anunnaki had to be determined. The diviners would sacrifice sheep, examine the organs, compare what they found against the omen texts, and deliver their interpretation. In this way, the Anunnaki participated in every significant event. Their will, their wisdom, their knowledge of future events could be accessed by those who understood the cosmic language of signs. Chapter 12. The Anunnaki and the Underworld. Let your consciousness drift down now, below the earth, to the realm where some Anunnaki ruled over the dead. The Sumerian underworld, called Kur or Irkalla, was a gloomy place beneath the earth where all the dead eventually travelled, regardless of their virtue or vice in life. It was not primarily a place of punishment, but simply the land from which no one returns, where spirits ate dust and saw no light. The goddess Ereshkigal ruled this domain as Queen of the Dead. The 7 Anunnaki judges served as her council, determining the fate of each arriving soul. These judges, called the Anunnaki of the underworld, maintained order in the realm of shadows just as their celestial counterparts maintained order above. The myth of Inanna's descent to the underworld provides the most detailed description of this realm and its rulers. Inanna, Queen of Heaven and Goddess of Love and War, decides to visit her sister Ereshkigal in the underworld. She prepares carefully, adorning herself with all her divine powers in the form of jewellery and garments, and instructs her attendant Ninshubur what to do if she does not return. Inanna descends through 7 gates, and at each gate she must remove one piece of her divine regalia. First her crown, then her earrings, her necklace, her breastplate, her golden ring, her lapis measuring rod and line, and finally her royal robe. She arrives before Ereshkigal naked and powerless, having been stripped of all protection and authority. The 7 Anunnaki judges of the underworld fix their eyes upon her, eyes of death. At their word, Inanna is struck dead and her corpse hung on a hook. 3 days and 3 nights pass. Above, Ninshubur carries out Inanna's instructions, going to the gods to beg for help. Enlil and Nanna refuse, saying Inanna brought her fate upon herself by descending to the underworld. But Enki, clever Enki, creates 2 creatures from the dirt beneath his fingernails and sends them to the underworld with the food and water of life to revive Inanna. The plan works, but the Anunnaki decree that someone must take Inanna's place in the underworld. No one can leave the realm of the dead without providing a substitute. Inanna searches for someone to take her place and eventually chooses her husband Dumuzi, who had not mourned her death. Dumuzi flees but is eventually captured and brought to the underworld. His sister Geshtinana volunteers to share his fate, and so it is decreed that each will spend half the year in the underworld, alternating in a cycle that mirrors the agricultural seasons. This myth reveals the Anunnaki of the underworld as maintainers of cosmic law. Their decrees are absolute. Even the great goddess Inanna cannot simply return from death. The balance must be maintained, a life for a life. The cycle of seasons, of death and rebirth in nature, is thus anchored in divine precedent, in the journey of Inanna and the sacrifice of Dumuzi. Let these ancient mysteries wash over you. The realm below mirrors the realm above, and both are governed by the Anunnaki in their various forms and functions, maintaining the cosmic order that holds reality together. Chapter 13. The Epic of Gilgamesh. Drift deeper now as we explore the most famous epic of ancient Mesopotamia, a story featuring the Anunnaki at crucial moments. Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, was 2/3 divine and 1/3 human, blessed with strength and wisdom beyond ordinary mortals, yet he was also arrogant and oppressive, exhausting his subjects with his demands. The people cry out to the gods, and the Anunnaki hear their prayers. The gods create Enkidu, a wild man who lives with animals, to serve as a rival and eventually a friend to Gilgamesh. When Enkidu is civilized by a temple priestess and comes to Uruk, he and Gilgamesh indeed fight, but neither can overcome the other. They become companions, brothers in spirit, and together embark on adventures. They journey to the cedar forest to slay the demon Humbaba, guardian of the sacred trees. Before the battle, Gilgamesh prays to Shamash, the sun god, for aid. The Anunnaki are present. In every phase of the journey, their will-shaping events, their power invoked for protection. After killing Humbaba and returning to Uruk, Gilgamesh rejects the romantic advances of Ishtar, goddess of love and war. Enraged by his refusal and insults, Ishtar demands that her father Anu send the Bull of Heaven to destroy Gilgamesh. Anu initially refuses, warning of the consequences, but Ishtar threatens to break down the gates of the underworld and raise the dead if she doesn't get her way. Anu relents and sends the bull. Gilgamesh and Enkidu fight and kill the Bull of Heaven, but this deed offends the gods. The Anunnaki gather in council to decide the hero's punishment. They decree that one of them must die. Enkidu is chosen. He falls ill, and over 12 days weakens and finally dies, despite Gilgamesh's desperate pleas to the Anunnaki for mercy. Enkidu's death transforms Gilgamesh. For the first time, he truly confronts mortality. His grief is overwhelming, and he refuses to accept that death is inevitable. He undertakes a desperate quest to find Utnapishtim, the flood survivor who was granted immortality by the Anunnaki. Gilgamesh's journey takes him to the ends of the earth, through mountain passages guarded by scorpion beings across the waters of death. He finally reaches Utnapishtim, who tells him the story of the Great Flood, how the Anunnaki decided to destroy humanity, how Ea secretly warned him to build a boat, how the flood came and even the gods were terrified by what they had done. After the flood, Utnapishtim made a sacrifice, and the gods, hungry after days without offerings, gathered around like flies. Enlil was angry that humans had survived, but Ea defended his action. Finally, the Anunnaki granted Utnapishtim and his wife immortality, as the only humans to survive the deluge. Gilgamesh begs for the same gift. Utnapishtim challenges him. If Gilgamesh wishes to live forever, let him first try not sleeping for 6 days and 7 nights. Gilgamesh fails immediately, falling asleep before Utnapishtim finishes speaking. He cannot conquer even sleep, the little brother of death. How then could he conquer death itself? As Gilgamesh prepares to return home in despair, Utnapishtim's wife takes pity on him and tells him of a plant at the bottom of the sea that can restore youth. Gilgamesh dives and retrieves this plant, planning to bring it back to Uruk to test on an old man before using it himself. But on the journey home, while Gilgamesh bathes in a pool, a serpent steals the plant and is rejuvenated, shedding its old skin. Gilgamesh returns to Uruk empty-handed, having learned that immortality is not for mortals. The Anunnaki have decreed the boundary between divine and human, and that boundary holds. Yet Gilgamesh finds a kind of peace in his mortality, taking pride in the great walls of Uruk he has built, understanding that legacy and achievement offer a form of immortality more appropriate to human nature than trying to live forever. The Epic of Gilgamesh, preserved on tablets for over 4,000 years, presents the Anunnaki as the ultimate arbiters of cosmic law. They set boundaries that even the mightiest heroes cannot cross. They determine fate and enforce consequences. Chapter 14. Modern Discoveries. Let your mind drift forward now through thousands of years to the rediscovery of Anunnaki knowledge in modern times. For centuries the cuneiform script remained undeciphered. Ancient clay tablets, indecipherable mysteries. The great cities of Mesopotamia lay buried beneath desert sands, their names preserved only in biblical references and Greek histories. Then, in the 19th century, archaeologists began excavating ancient Near Eastern sites. In 1849, Austin Henry Layard discovered the library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh, containing over 30,000 tablets. Other major finds followed at Ur, Uruk, Nippur and Babylon. Gradually, through the painstaking work of scholars like Henry Rawlinson, Edward Hincks and Julius Oppert, cuneiform was deciphered, and the voices of ancient Sumer and Babylon spoke again after millennia of silence. Among the texts recovered were the creation epics, the flood narratives, astronomical records, mathematical tablets, legal codes, and countless administrative documents that painted a picture of daily life in the world's first great civilization. And threaded throughout these texts were references to the Anunnaki, those mysterious beings who, according to the ancient authors, had come from the sky to establish civilization on Earth. Modern scholars have approached these texts from various perspectives. Traditional academic analysis treats the Anunnaki as mythological deities, symbolic representations of natural forces and social concepts. From this view, Anu represents the heavens, Enlil the storms and weather, Enki the waters and wisdom. The myths encode ancient observations about nature and early attempts to understand cosmic order. The Sumerians' advanced astronomical knowledge, their mathematical achievements, their creation of writing and complex urban societies are seen as products of human ingenuity developed over centuries, with the gods representing cultural metaphors for these achievements, rather than literal external sources. Yet questions linger. How did the Sumerians achieve such sophisticated astronomical calculations so early in their development? Why does their mythology consistently describe gods who came from the sky and taught them civilization? What exactly were they trying to tell us? In the 1970s, author Zecharia Sitchin proposed a controversial alternative interpretation. Sitchin, who claimed to read cuneiform though his translations have been disputed by academic scholars, argued that the Anunnaki were not mythological, but rather extraterrestrial beings who came to Earth from a hypothetical planet called Nibiru. According to Sitchin's interpretation, the Anunnaki genetically engineered humans as a slave species to mine gold, and much of human history has been shaped by conflicts among these alien visitors. Sitchin's theories gained a popular following, but were rejected by mainstream scholars who pointed out numerous problems with his translations, his understanding of Sumerian cosmology, and his scientific claims. Nevertheless, his work sparked renewed public interest in the Anunnaki, and inspired numerous other alternative theories about ancient astronauts and alien origins of human civilization. The debate between traditional scholarly interpretation and alternative theories continues. As you drift deeper into sleep, consider both possibilities. Perhaps the Anunnaki were indeed purely mythological, brilliant metaphors created by human imagination to explain natural phenomena and encode cultural values. Or perhaps, some argue, the myths preserve distorted memories of actual events, actual beings, actual intervention in human development. The clay tablets remain, ancient witnesses offering their testimony. The ruins of ziggurats still rise from the desert sands. The astronomical knowledge encoded in cuneiform still demonstrates remarkable precision. The questions echo across the centuries. Chapter 15. The Anunnaki Hierarchy. Let us explore deeper the organization of these sky gods, their ranks and relationships. At the apex of the Anunnaki hierarchy stood the great triad of supreme gods. Anu, father of gods, represented the ultimate divine authority. His name meant heaven or sky, and he dwelt in the highest realm, removed from direct intervention in earthly affairs, but serving as the source of all divine legitimacy and power. Anu's power was such that other gods came to him for judgment in disputes, and his word was final. Yet he often delegated authority to his sons and other family members, presiding over the divine assembly, but allowing others to handle day-to-day administration of the cosmos. Enlil, whose name meant Lord Wind or Lord Storm, served as king of the gods in practical terms. Though nominally subordinate to his father Anu, Enlil held the tablets of destiny and determined the fate of both gods and humans. He was stern, sometimes harsh, the god of law and order, of consequences and punishment. It was Enlil who pushed for the great flood to wipe out humanity, Enlil who enforced divine decrees with strict severity. Enki, also called Ea, served as the god of wisdom, craft, and the sweet waters beneath the earth. Where Enlil was rigid, Enki was flexible. Where Enlil enforced rules, Enki found loopholes. Enki was humanity's friend among the Anunnaki, repeatedly finding ways to help humans survive the harsher judgments of his brother and father. The rivalry between Enlil and Enki appears throughout Mesopotamian mythology, a cosmic struggle between different approaches to divine governance. Some scholars see in this rivalry a reflection of ancient political conflicts between different city-states or priestly factions. Others see archetypal forces of order versus creativity, law versus mercy, justice versus compassion. Below the supreme triad stood other great Anunnaki, each with specific domains and responsibilities. Ninhursag, the mother goddess, presided over birth and childbearing. Inanna or Ishtar ruled love, sex, warfare and political power. Utu or Shamash governed justice and the sun. Nana or Sin ruled the moon and measured time. Nergal commanded the powers of death and disease. Ninurta served as warrior god and god of agriculture. Each major city in Sumer had a patron deity from among the Anunnaki. Nippur belonged to Enlil and served as the religious centre of the Sumerian world. Uruk was sacred to Inanna. Worshipped Nana. Eridu, the first city, honoured Enki. Political power often correlated with the status of a city's patron god within the divine hierarchy. When one city conquered another, it was understood that the victor's god had proven superior. Yet the conquered god was not eliminated but rather incorporated into the victor's pantheon, often at a lower rank. This created an ever-growing assemblage of deities, all considered part of the Anunnaki, all assigned roles and responsibilities within the cosmic order. The younger generation of Anunnaki, children of the great gods, served various functions. They acted as messengers, as executors of divine will, as specialists in particular aspects of cosmic administration. The hierarchy extended down through multiple ranks, from the greatest gods who determined fate to minor deities who oversaw specific natural phenomena or human activities. In your drowsy state, visualize this divine bureaucracy as the Sumerians might have. Heaven organized like a great palace or temple complex, with the supreme gods in the innermost sanctuaries, lesser deities in outer chambers, and multitudes of divine servants carrying out the endless work of maintaining cosmic order. Earth mirrored heaven, human kingdoms reflected divine organization, and the Anunnaki oversaw all. Chapter 16. Sacred Marriage and Divine Descent. Drift deeper now into mysteries of divine and human union, the sacred marriage rites that connected earth and heaven. Among the most significant rituals in Sumerian religion was the Hieros Gamos, the sacred marriage between a god and goddess, often enacted through their human representatives. In Uruk, the king would take the role of Dumuzi, shepherd god and consort of Inanna, while the high priestess embodied the goddess herself. Their ritual union in the temple was believed to ensure fertility of the land, prosperity of the city, and proper cosmic order. These were not merely symbolic acts, but understood as actual conduits of divine power. Through the king and priestess, the gods themselves united, their energies flowing into the earthly realm, blessing crops and herds, ensuring children would be born and the community would thrive. The boundary between mortal and divine became permeable during these sacred rites. The concept of divine descent appeared repeatedly in royal genealogies. Kings claimed divine parentage, usually from a goddess. Gilgamesh's mother was the goddess Ninsun, granting him his extraordinary nature. This was not metaphor but literal claim. Certain humans carried Anunnaki blood in their veins, explaining their ability to rule, their wisdom, their connection to divine knowledge. Some texts describe unions between Anunnaki and humans that produced offspring. These children of mixed divine and human heritage often became heroes, kings, or founders of dynasties. They bridged the realms, possessing qualities of both earth and heaven, capable of communicating with gods while living among mortals. The Book of Enoch, a later Jewish apocalyptic text likely influenced by Mesopotamian mythology, describes watchers, angels who descended to earth and took human wives, producing the Nephilim, a race of giants and heroes. While not directly mentioning Anunnaki, the parallels are striking. Beings from heaven descending to earth, teaching humanity arts and sciences, mating with humans, producing extraordinary offspring, eventually provoking divine judgment. The patterns echo across cultures and centuries. In Mesopotamian understanding, the line between divine and human was not absolute. Gods could die, as shown when Enkidu dies despite his divine creation. Humans could attain divinity, as Utnapishtim did after surviving the flood. The Anunnaki themselves had been created from earlier divine generations. The cosmos was fluid, hierarchical but not rigidly sealed into separate categories. This fluidity had profound implications. If the Anunnaki could descend and interact directly with humans, if they could mate with humans and produce offspring, if humans could through exceptional circumstances attain divine status, then the relationship between heaven and earth was intimate, personal, ongoing. The Anunnaki were not distant abstractions but potential ancestors, teachers, lovers, judges who remained actively involved in human affairs. The sacred marriage rituals enacted this intimacy. For one night each year, heaven and earth united in the most fundamental way, and from that union came the blessing of continued life and prosperity. As you rest in sleep's embrace, imagine those ancient ceremonies, torchlight flickering on temple walls, incense smoke rising, the power of the ritual transforming participants into living vessels of divine presence. Chapter 17. The Knowledge Keepers. Let us explore now the role of priests and priestesses who maintain the sacred knowledge of the Anunnaki. The temple complexes of Mesopotamia were not merely places of worship, but centers of learning, administration, and cultural preservation. Young boys and girls from elite families entered temple schools called eduba, tablet houses, where they spent years learning to read and write cuneiform, studying mathematics, astronomy, literature, law, and theology. The curriculum was demanding. Students began by copying simple signs, then moved to syllables, words, and eventually complete texts. They memorized lengthy literary works, mathematical tables, astronomical observations, and ritual procedures. Only a small percentage of students completed the full course of study to become scribes, and fewer still entered the highest ranks of the priesthood, where the deepest mysteries of the Anunnaki were taught. These initiated priests served as intermediaries between the divine and human realms. They knew the proper rituals, the correct prayers, the meaning of omens. They interpreted dreams, advised kings, conducted sacrifices, and maintain the daily service of the gods. Their knowledge was power, carefully guarded and passed down through generations. Libraries within temple complexes preserved tablets containing creation myths, epic poems, scientific observations and ritual instructions. The Library of Ashurbanipal at Nineveh, though dating to the 7th century BCE, contained copies of texts composed centuries or even millennia earlier. The priests saw themselves as guardians of ancient wisdom, knowledge originally given to humanity by the Anunnaki themselves. Certain texts were restricted, accessible only to those who had achieved proper initiation. Astronomical omens, medical incantations, and detailed ritual procedures were considered too powerful or too sacred for common knowledge. The priests formed an exclusive class of knowledge keepers, mediating between the divine wisdom of the Anunnaki and the needs of ordinary people. Women served crucial roles in this religious hierarchy. Priestesses, particularly high priestesses like the Entu of the moon, god Nanna at Ur, wielded considerable power and authority. Some priestesses were daughters of kings, dedicated to divine service, living in temple complexes and performing essential rituals. The Naditu priestesses, celibate women who lived in cloisters, conducted business, owned property, and participated actively in economic life while maintaining their sacred vows. The most famous of these priestesses was Enkidu Anna, daughter of Sargon of Akkad, high priestess of the moon god at Ur around 2300 BCE. She composed hymns to the goddess Inanna that survive on cuneiform tablets, making her the first author in history whose name we know. Her poetry reflects deep theological knowledge, personal relationship with the divine, and sophisticated literary skill. Enkidu Anna's hymns describe direct encounters with Nanna, visions and revelations, intimate knowledge of divine nature. She speaks as one who knows the goddess personally, who has experienced divine presence and power. If we take her words seriously, they suggest that the highest priests and priestesses of the Anunnaki achieved mystical states, direct communion with the gods they served. Through meditation, prayer, ritual, perhaps psychoactive substances used in sacred contexts, these knowledge keepers accessed altered states of consciousness where the boundary between human and divine became thin. They brought back knowledge from these experiences, insights they recorded in texts and transmitted to subsequent generations. The wisdom of the Anunnaki in this understanding was not merely information recorded in tablets, but living knowledge accessible through spiritual practice and initiation. The texts preserved the exoteric teachings available to all educated persons, but behind them lay esoteric knowledge available only to those who underwent proper training and achieved direct spiritual experience. As you drift in the hypnagogic state between waking and sleeping, perhaps you touch the same realm the ancient priests accessed. Perhaps in dreams and visions, something of the ancient knowledge still flows, whispers from the Anunnaki echoing across the millennia to those who quiet their minds to listen. Chapter 18, The Tablets of Destiny. Deeper into the night now, into the mystery of fate and cosmic order. Among the most significant divine objects mentioned in Mesopotamian mythology were the Tablets of Destiny, also called Mi in some contexts. These tablets, worn on the breast of whichever god possessed them, granted supreme authority over heaven and earth. Whoever controlled the Tablets of Destiny controlled fate itself, determining the course of events, the rise and fall of civilizations, the life and death of gods and humans. In the Enuma Elish, after Marduk defeats Tiamat, he takes the Tablets of Destiny from her consort Kingu and fastens them on his own breast, confirming his supremacy among the Anunnaki. The tablets represented not merely symbolic authority, but actual power to shape reality according to divine will. Another myth tells how the demon bird Anzu steals the Tablets of Destiny from Enlil while the god bathes. With the tablets, Anzu becomes invulnerable, able to counter any attack with a word. The gods are thrown into chaos. Who can recover the tablets when the thief controls fate itself? Eventually, the warrior god Ninurta, through clever strategy and divine assistance, defeats Anzu and returns the tablets to Enlil. These stories reveal fascinating theological concepts. Fate was not impersonal or automatic, but determined by conscious divine will through the instrumentality of the tablets. Power could be seized, authority challenged, even within the divine hierarchy. The cosmos required constant vigilance to maintain order against forces of chaos that repeatedly emerged to challenge established rule. The tablets themselves seem to represent something like natural law, or cosmic principles, the underlying patterns and forces that govern reality. But these laws were not abstract. They were administered by conscious divine beings, the Anunnaki, who used the tablets to shape the universe according to their understanding of proper order. Some modern interpreters have speculated about technological interpretations of such artifacts. Could the tablets of destiny represent some actual device or technology misunderstood by ancient peoples? If the Anunnaki were extraterrestrial visitors, as alternative theorists propose, might their advanced technology have seemed magical to humans, described in the only terms available as divine tablets granting control over reality? Traditional scholars reject such speculation as reading modern concepts into ancient myths. The tablets, they argue, are purely mythological symbolic representations of divine authority and cosmic order, no more literally technological than Zeus's thunderbolts or Odin's spear. Yet the question persists. Why do the myths consistently describe the gods as possessing objects, artifacts, tools of power? The tablets of destiny, Inanna's me that she stole from Enki, magical weapons and implements used by various deities. If these are purely symbolic, why give them such concrete material descriptions? Why emphasize their physical possession and transfer from one being to another? Perhaps the answer lies between extremes. The tablets of destiny might represent both symbolic authority and actual esoteric knowledge, information encoded in material form that granted its possessor understanding of cosmic principles. In an age before writing was common, knowledge preserved on tablets would indeed seem like magical objects granting tremendous power to those who could read and apply their contents. The Anunnaki, as bringers of civilization, as teachers of humanity, would naturally possess records of their knowledge, inscriptions of the principles they used to organize society and understand nature. To humans only beginning to grasp literacy and abstract thought, such tablets would seem to possess inherent power to control fate itself through the knowledge they contained. Let this mystery drift through your consciousness. The tablets of destiny, whatever their nature, represented ultimate authority, the power to determine outcomes, to shape reality according to plan and purpose. The Anunnaki held this power, used it to structure the cosmos, and occasionally fought among themselves for its control. Chapter 19. The Great Flood. Reconsidered. As sleep deepens its hold, return with me to the most dramatic story involving the Anunnaki, the deluge that destroyed the world. The flood narrative appears in multiple Mesopotamian texts: the Sumerian flood story, the Atrahasis epic, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and later adaptations. In each version, the Anunnaki decide to destroy humanity with a catastrophic flood. The reasons vary slightly: human noise disturbing the gods' rest, human overpopulation, human wickedness, but the decision is unanimous among most of the Divine Council. Only Enki dissents, and he is bound by oath not to directly warn humanity. His clever solution, speaking to the reed wall of Utnapishtim's house, rather than to the man directly, allows the survival of one family and the seeds of all living things. When the flood comes, it is so terrible that even the Anunnaki are frightened by what they have unleashed. The Atrahasis epic provides the most vivid description of the gods' reaction. The Anunnaki huddle like dogs, cowering against the walls of heaven. The goddess Ninhursag weeps, lamenting her agreement to the destruction. The gods are hungry and thirsty, for there are no more humans to provide offerings. When Utnapishtim finally makes sacrifice after the flood, the gods gather around like flies, desperately hungry, realizing too late the consequences of wiping out their worshippers. This portrayal is remarkable. The Anunnaki emerge as fallible beings capable of making mistakes, of acting on emotion, of suffering consequences they failed to foresee. They are powerful but not omniscient, immortal but not imperturbable. The Great Flood becomes a story of divine error and regret as much as human salvation. Geologists and archaeologists have debated whether the flood narratives preserve memory of actual catastrophic flooding in Mesopotamia. The region is prone to flooding when the Tigris and Euphrates overflow. Evidence exists of several major floods in the early history of Mesopotamian civilization. Perhaps the myths evolved from cultural memories of such disasters, interpreted through theological frameworks of divine judgment and mercy. The similarities between the Mesopotamian flood stories and the biblical account of Noah have long been noted. The general outline is the same. God or gods decide to destroy humanity with a flood. One righteous man is warned and builds a boat. He brings his family and animals aboard. The flood destroys all other life. The waters eventually recede. The survivors emerge and make sacrifice. The divine powers resolve never to send such a flood again. When George Smith first translated the flood story from the Gilgamesh tablets in 1872, it caused an international sensation. Here was an account of the flood preceding the biblical version by centuries or even millennia, calling into question assumptions about the uniqueness and originality of biblical narratives. The discovery demonstrated that the biblical authors had drawn on older traditions, adapted earlier myths, incorporated Mesopotamian stories into their own theological framework. For our purposes, the significance lies in what the flood story reveals about how the Mesopotamians understood the Anunnaki. These were not abstractions or moral exemplars, but complex beings who made decisions, argued among themselves, experienced fear and regret, changed their minds in response to events. The relationship between the Anunnaki and humanity was intimate, consequential, ongoing. After the flood, according to the myths, the Anunnaki established new terms for the relationship with humanity. Measures were put in place to control human population: infertility for some women, child mortality, celibacy for priestesses. The harsh consequences of human existence, death, disease, disaster, were understood not as random misfortunes, but as policies enacted by the Anunnaki to prevent another situation where humanity's noise and numbers might again disturb divine peace. This theology of imposed limitations suggests that humans, if left unchecked, might grow too numerous or too powerful. The Anunnaki feared in some sense their own creation. They had designed humans as servants but had given them enough divine essence, the blood of a slain god mixed into the clay, that humans possessed potential the gods found threatening. The tension between divine power and human potential runs through all Mesopotamian mythology. The Anunnaki created humans to serve them, but must constantly regulate and control that creation to prevent it from exceeding its proper bounds. Humans strive to transcend their limits, to attain divine knowledge and immortality. But the Anunnaki enforce boundaries, ensuring that mortals remain mortal, that servants remain servants. As you rest in sleep, consider this ancient drama. The gods who shaped us, according to the myths, remained uncertain about us, wary of what we might become, willing to destroy us if we grew too troublesome, yet ultimately choosing to preserve us. The relationship is fraught, complex, neither wholly hostile nor wholly benevolent, an uneasy partnership between creator and created. Chapter 20. The Me and Divine Order. Let your consciousness drift now toward understanding how the Anunnaki maintained cosmic order through the concept of me. The Sumerian word me, pronounced may, has no direct equivalent in English. It encompasses divine decrees, fundamental principles, attributes of civilization, cosmic laws, and cultural concepts all at once. The me were not abstract ideas, but rather concrete powers, or attributes that could be possessed, transferred, stolen, or lost. According to myth, Enki guarded the me in his temple at Eridu. These comprised over 100 fundamental aspects of civilization: kingship, priesthood, truth, music, metalworking, writing, judgment, victory, counseling, fear, kindness, law, and countless others. Each me represented both a concept and the power to manifest that concept in reality. The myth of Inanna and Enki tells how the clever goddess travelled to Eridu and plied Enki with beer until he was drunk. In his intoxicated state, Enki offered Inanna the me one by one, and she accepted them all. When Enki sobered up and realised what he had done, he sent various beings to retrieve the me from Inanna, but she escaped with them to her city of Uruk, enriching it with all aspects of civilization. This myth served to explain Uruk's cultural prominence and to validate Inanna's status as a major deity. But it also reveals how the Sumerians understood civilization itself, not as gradually evolving human achievement, but as divine gifts, specific packages of knowledge and power bestowed by the Anunnaki, and transferable between cities and deities. Each me was me, discrete and specific. You couldn't have civilization in general, You had to have each aspect of civilization separately bestowed. The me for kingship was separate from the me for priesthood, which was separate from the me for metalworking. Together, the complete set of me constituted everything that separated civilized human society from barbarism. This fragmented understanding of culture as discrete transferable powers, rather than integrated holistic development, seems alien to modern thinking, yet it persisted throughout Mesopotamian history, suggesting a fundamental difference in how ancient peoples conceptualized knowledge and civilization. If we take seriously the idea that the Anunnaki taught humanity civilization, then the me concept makes sense. Each skill, each social institution, each technology would have been taught separately, introduced at different times, by different divine teachers. The me catalogue might represent a genuine curriculum, the sequence and content of education provided by the Anunnaki to their human charges. The fact that Inanna had to steal the me, that they could be lost or possessed by different deities, suggests that knowledge was strictly controlled. The Anunnaki did not freely share all their wisdom. Access to different aspects of civilization was regulated, granted or withheld according to divine policy. This concept appears in other mythological traditions. Prometheus stealing fire from the gods to give to humans, paying eternal punishment for that transgression. The serpent in Eden offering knowledge of good and evil that God had forbidden. The recurring theme of knowledge as divine possession, carefully guarded, dangerous when humans gain unauthorized access. Perhaps these myths encode actual history of knowledge transmission, not from gods or aliens, but from one human group to another. Advanced civilizations encountering less advanced ones, sharing some knowledge while jealously guarding other secrets. Over generations, the memory of who taught whom might fade, leaving only myths of divine teachers, gods who brought civilization, knowledge keepers who held cosmic secrets. Or perhaps the myths mean exactly what they say. The Anunnaki possessed knowledge they carefully controlled, sharing enough to make humans useful, but withholding the deeper secrets that might make humans their equals. The me concept would then represent the curriculum of permitted knowledge, while beyond the me lay deeper mysteries reserved for divine comprehension alone. Let these possibilities drift through your mind without grasping at conclusions. The me, whatever their nature, represented the building blocks of civilization, the discrete elements that together composed culture and society, all originating from the divine realm, all gifts or thefts from the Anunnaki treasury of knowledge. Chapter 21. The Nephilim Connection. As you rest deeper in sleep's embrace, let us explore the fascinating connections between Mesopotamian and biblical traditions regarding divine-human interaction. The Book of Genesis contains a mysterious passage. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them. They were the heroes of old, men of renown. This brief verse opens vast questions. Who were these sons of God? What were the Nephilim? The passage suggests a time when divine beings bred with humans, producing extraordinary offspring. The text treats this as historical fact, not metaphor, though it offers little detail or explanation. The Book of Enoch, a Jewish apocalyptic text not included in most biblical canons, but influential in early Christianity, expands dramatically on this theme. It names the Watchers, angels who descended to Mount Hermon, 200 of them, who swore an oath to take human wives despite knowing this violated divine law. Their leader was Semyaza, and the text lists other leaders including Azazel, who taught humans metalworking and cosmetics. According to Enoch, the Watchers taught humanity various arts and sciences, weapon-making, enchantments, astrology, the signs of the earth, the signs of the sun and moon. This teaching was unauthorized, sharing divine knowledge with beings meant to remain ignorant. The offspring of Watchers and human women were the Nephilim, giants who consumed the resources of humanity and eventually turned to cannibalism. The parallels with Mesopotamian traditions are striking. Divine beings descending from heaven to earth, teaching humanity civilization, mating with humans to produce extraordinary offspring, unauthorized knowledge transmission angering the supreme deity, a catastrophic flood sent to destroy the corrupted world, one righteous human family preserved to start anew. Scholars note that Jewish tradition developed during and after the Babylonian exile, when Jewish elites lived in Mesopotamia, exposed to Babylonian culture and mythology. the cross-pollination of ideas seems evident. Whether the Jews adapted Mesopotamian myths to their own purposes, or whether both traditions drew on deeper, older sources remains debated. The Anunnaki and the Watchers share functional similarities. Both are divine beings who descend to Earth. Both teach humanity, both interact physically with humans, both provoke some kind of crisis requiring divine intervention. The names differ, the details shift, but the pattern remains recognizable. Some researchers argue these are different names for the same entities, cultural variations on actual historical events. Others see convergent mythology, different cultures independently developing similar stories to explain the origin of civilization and the presence of forbidden knowledge. Still others view it all as pure myth, symbolic narratives with no historical referent. What can we conclude with confidence? Ancient Near Eastern cultures shared a common conceptual vocabulary regarding divine-human interaction. They believed in physical divine beings who could appear on Earth, teach humans, mate with humans, produce offspring. This wasn't vague spirituality, but concrete belief in tangible entities with form and substance. Whether we interpret these entities as gods, angels, aliens, or personified natural forces depends on our broader worldview and evidence standards. But we cannot dismiss the beliefs of ancient peoples as simple-minded superstition. They preserved these traditions with care, considered them essential truths, built societies and theologies around them. The sophistication of Mesopotamian civilization, their advanced astronomy and mathematics, their literary achievements, their complex social organization, all emerged from a culture that believed the Anunnaki walked among them. The question is not whether they believed it, they clearly did, but what that belief represented. Memory, metaphor, mistake, or something else entirely? In the borderland of sleep, these questions lose their sharp edges. The Anunnaki and the Watchers merge into archetypal divine teachers, bringers of knowledge, transgressors of boundaries between heaven and earth. Whether historical or mythical, they represent humanity's ancient understanding of how civilization began, how knowledge was gained, and why existence is structured as it is, with gods above and humans below, with secrets kept and secrets revealed. Chapter 22. Archaeological Evidence and Questions. Drift with me now through the physical remnants of ancient Sumer, the artifacts that preserve evidence of Anunnaki belief. The great ziggurats still stand, though worn by millennia. At Ur, the massive three-stage structure dedicated to Nana rises from the desert, its mud brick core partially restored by archaeologists. Climbing its ancient steps, one can imagine priests ascending toward the shrine where heaven met earth, where the god descended to commune with humanity. At Uruk, excavations reveal the White Temple, dating to around 3000 BCE, built atop an artificial platform, its walls plastered white, visible for miles across the flat plain. This temple to Anu, father of the Anunnaki, marked the sacred center of one of humanity's first cities. The physical evidence is unambiguous. The Sumerians built massive structures dedicated to the gods they believed walked among them. These were not merely symbolic. They were functional temples where daily rituals maintained the god's presence, where priests served deity needs, where divine statues were housed and tended like living beings. Thousands of cuneiform tablets record temple administration, deliveries of grain and animals for offerings, wages for temple workers, inventories of sacred objects. The gods were embedded in the economic and administrative life of the cities. To serve Inanna or Enlil or Enki was not abstract devotion, but practical employment in vast temple complexes that functioned as centres of political and economic power. Small cylinder, seals carved with images of the gods survive in abundance. These seals were rolled across clay documents to authenticate them, leaving impressions of intricate scenes. Many show figures identified by symbols and context as Anunnaki deities, receiving worship, dispensing blessings, or engaging in mythological scenes. Common people carried these seals, pressed them into their business documents, invoked divine witness to their transactions. Statues recovered from temples show wide-eyed worshippers, hands clasped in prayer, dedicated by donors to stand eternally before the gods in their shrines. These worshippers have names recorded in inscriptions, real people from 5,000 years ago, who believed the statues would represent them before the Anunnaki. The royal cemetery at Ur revealed extraordinary evidence of elaborate death rituals. In some graves, dozens of attendants were buried with the principal occupant, apparently having drunk poison to accompany their lord or lady into the afterlife. The practice suggests beliefs about the afterworld, where the deceased would need servants, where status from earthly life continued under the jurisdiction of the underworld Anunnaki. Grave goods included spectacular goldwork, lapis lazuli from Afghanistan, carnelian from India, demonstrating extensive trade networks. The famous Standard of Ur, a wooden box inlaid with shell and lapis, depicts war on one side and peace on the other, with the king larger than other figures, sitting in the presence of divine symbols. All this physical evidence confirms that Sumerian civilization was thoroughly theocratic, organised around service to the Anunnaki. But it tells us nothing definitive about whether those gods were real in any objective sense, or merely believed to be real. The evidence of belief is unquestionable. The nature of what was believed in remains mysterious. Some researchers point to anomalies in Sumerian achievements as possible evidence of external intervention. The seemingly sudden appearance of writing around 3200 BCE, going from no writing system to a sophisticated one in a few generations. The precision of astronomical observations that should have required centuries to develop. The mathematical knowledge including concepts like the place value system that wouldn't be rediscovered in the West until the Middle Ages. Skeptics respond that absence of evidence for gradual development doesn't mean it didn't occur. Much could be lost to time. The sophistication might be less surprising than it appears. Human ingenuity should not be underestimated. Extraordinary achievement doesn't require supernatural explanation. The debate continues, circling back always to interpretation. Do we read the evidence through the lens of normal human development, or do we allow for possibilities the ancient texts themselves claim? Intervention by beings with knowledge beyond what humans had yet developed. In the mystery of sleep, let these questions rest unanswered. The ruins remain, silent witnesses. The tablets preserve their ancient claims. The gods the Sumerians worshipped, whether metaphor or memory, shaped one of history's most influential civilizations. Chapter 23. The Anunnaki in popular culture. Let your mind drift now forward to modern times, to how Anunnaki ideas have captured contemporary imagination. In the late 20th and early 21st centuries, the Anunnaki experienced a renaissance in popular culture, appearing in books, television shows, films, and internet discussions. The ancient Sumerian gods were reinterpreted through modern frameworks of science fiction, conspiracy theory, and alternative history. Zecharia Sitchin's Earth Chronicles series, beginning in 1976 with The 12th Planet, proposed that the Anunnaki were extraterrestrials from a planet called Nibiru. According to Sitchin's theory, the Anunnaki came to Earth about 450,000 years ago, seeking gold to repair their planet's atmosphere. They genetically engineered Homo sapiens by combining their own DNA with that of Homo erectus, creating a worker species to mine gold for them. Sitchin's interpretations of cuneiform texts were disputed by academic scholars who noted numerous errors in his translations and understanding of Sumerian. No mainstream archaeologist or linguist accepted his theories. Yet his book sold millions of copies and inspired countless others to explore alternative histories of human origins. The ideas spread through documentaries, notably the Ancient Aliens television series that premiered in 2010, which explored Anunnaki theories alongside other ancient astronaut hypotheses. The show's premise, that extraterrestrials visited Earth in ancient times and were interpreted as gods, found a receptive audience among those skeptical of mainstream archaeological and historical narratives. In these modern retellings, the Anunnaki transform from deities to aliens, from spiritual beings to physical extraterrestrials with advanced technology. Miracles become misunderstood science. Divine power becomes technological capability. Worship becomes cargo cult behavior, primitive humans venerating beings they don't understand.